trainings in counseling, human sexuality. She has counseling experience of over 35 years, counseling hundreds of couples, teenagers, men and women. She is sought after all over the world. She speaks internationally. She has set up a counseling institute and has trained over 500 counselors at the Relate Africa Institute, which she founded 4 years ago. She experienced secondary infertility for 11 years before the next set of children were born. Her next set of children were born. Then we have Mr. Segun Olusonya. He's an author of My Adoption Story. He believes it's not what happens to you, but how you deal with it that matters. Segun and his wife, Sheyi, dealt with childlessness for over 10 years. They started their adoption journey in 2002 and adopted their son in 2005. They later had 2 birth children. Segun's an adoption champion. Then we have also Dr. Nike Bello, who's an associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Ibadan and a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist at the University College Hospital Ibadan. She has worked in this specialty for 20 years and has published 75 peer-reviewed research articles. Her main interests are infertility and reproductive medicine. Mrs. Yewande Zaccheaus is the author of God's Waiting Room, books 1 to 4, and executive producer of the movie The Wait. Her books and the movie share the real-life experiences of men and women who have had to wait in various areas of life, whether for children, life partners, or other breakthroughs. Yewande has had a 9-year delay between her first and second child, and is passionate about encouraging people to have faith, find God, and discover purpose in their season of waiting. Mrs. Zaccheaus, a founding trustee of Wimbiz, is a lawyer, entrepreneur, and chairman of Eventful Limited, a very successful events planning business. She also serves on the board of several other companies. Then you have me. Well, I'm passionate about helping orphaned and abandoned children and have actively done so for over 18 years in my capacity as managing trustee of Heritage Homes Orphanage since 2002. I have authored 2 books on adoption, What Every Child Should Know About Adoption, and ABC of Adoption for Adults. I waited 7 years before having my first child and set up the Joy of Adoption platform to offer hope to those waiting for children, and of course, those that have chosen the path of adoption. So without much ado, I'll just go on to the first question, which is directed at Dr. Bello. Dr. Bello, what's the definition of infertility? And at what stage can one consider themselves infertile? Oh, sorry, Dr. Bello, let's go with your remarks first. I'll start with Mrs. Isweli. Mrs. Isweli, would you kindly give us your 1-minute remarks on this topic we've chosen to talk about today? Mrs. Isweli, please.
Just to say good evening to everyone and welcome to this amazing session. And I hope that at the end of it, we would all be very much enriched. This topic is an emotive one for me, also because I got interested in girls with crisis pregnancy, looking after them and wondering what to do with their babies afterwards, empowering them to continue, and then seeking help with how to look after the children, especially offering help for adoption and fostering. But I think, and I believe that every couple who wants to can have an option of what to do about having a child. And it's important that these options are made available to them, either fostering, adoption, or whatever else they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Isweli. Is Mrs. Zaccheaus in the house, please?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can we have your opening remarks, please? Welcome on board.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope your event went well, Mrs. Zakios. I know
Yes.
you showed your movie today in your church. I hope that went well.
It went very well. It was so well received, and it's just prepared me even for this session even more. You know, waiting is a very, very difficult experience. I mean, I don't want anybody to even try and play it down. It's a time of anxiety, it's a time of fear, it's a time of frustration. But I think what is important is that we help people to learn how to go through that period and to also know that it's a time of reflection, and it's a time that there will be lessons that you need to learn, and to open our hearts and our minds to know what those lessons are, so that you will be promoted to go into that next class. As you heard in my short bio, I had a 9-year wait. I mean, I had my first son immediately I got married, and it took 9 years before my daughter came. And I think I've sort of made it my life's work to find ways of just encouraging people who are going through that period of waiting, and to let them know that there is always, with God, faith, hope, and courage, light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Shagun, I'll go to you now. What are your remarks, please, as we start?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really honored to be on this panel. It's not lost on me that I'm the only guy on the panel, although talking about women, and I'm waiting. But I think I have a few things to say, and I would say them. It's emotional for me as well, because we waited for many years, and it seems that in our society we think that, okay, the men, they're not really involved in this. My wife and I were fully involved in this journey, and I went through every step with her, and it's not an easy thing, but it is not the end of the world. And that's what I hope we would deal with in this panel. Give hope to people who are waiting, help them to understand that the time of delay is not a time of denial. And there's so many options out there, and there's so much information out there these days. And really, if people can stand back and just keep out all the noise, because there's going to be a lot of noise when this happens, and just concentrate on each other and probably on God if they believe in God, and then settle down and decide on which routes, what they're going to do. Just have a plan. It's not easy at the time because your head is playing games with lots of things that are happening, but hopefully if you can just settle down and decide on a route and a plan and what to do, then you started to begin the winning the battle. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Bello, over to you, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I don't have too much to say by way of opening remarks, because I have the idea I'm going to have to say lots during the next 1 hour. So I'll just say thank you for inviting me to this panel, and I hope I'll be of assistance today. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go straight into asking you, Dr. Bello, what definition for lay people, what's the definition of infertility? At what stage can one consider themselves infertile?
Okay. All right. The definition of infertility basically is the inability to get pregnant after 1 year of trying. Now, trying involves you having unprotected sex, meaning that no contraception, and means you having regular sex. What medicine will consider regular is 2 to 3 times a week. Or even if it is not that regular, if you can hit the fertile period each month, we'll consider that adequate. And if you've done this for a year, we'll consider it time enough for you to ask for help.
Thank you.
What was the second part? That how long before you ask for help? I think I've answered that.
Yes. Yes. So you're done?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. And the next question will still go to you, Dr. Bello. When the issue of infertility is mentioned in a marriage, most people immediately, sorry, this is for Mrs. Isweli, most people immediately focus on the woman. Why is this so? For Mrs. Isweli, please.
Thank you very much, Emme, for this. But in your opening comments, I think we spoke a lot about women. So it would appear that it's just about women. But we do know that there is doubling of male infertility. So why is it that only women are have this stigma? I think it's patriarchy. I think it's because of the sheer importance of fertility for even the male sex. And so the first thing is to push it on to the woman. One was that in the traditional times, there was no way of checking, and men took it for granted that a man had to be fertile. His virility, his manhood was based on the power of getting women pregnant. And then there were ways of dissimulating anyway male infertility. He just had to get another person pregnant or get someone secretly pregnant, or the community had a way of organizing and hiding male infertility. And so we ended up with just women who couldn't hide it. A woman has to be pregnant for you to know she's fertile. A man, you can hide his infertility. And so it became socially conditioned to consider that it's only women who are infertile. And even today, perhaps we can ask Dr. Bello, there aren't so many ways of even testing male infertility now, but there's so many other ways of testing female infertility. And so you just keep giving the impression that it's all about women. But first thing, it is socially conditioned. Socially conditioned because of patriarchy and because of the way men see infertility and are afraid of it. And it's easier to push it onto the woman. And because it is difficult to hide female infertility. Thank you.
That is so unfair, though, because a lot of women have to carry this burden, even when they know they're not the ones responsible. And Mrs. Israeli, what sort of challenges do moms in waiting face in our society?
First of all, there is part of the problem for women who even have had secondary infertility, like Mrs. Zacchaeus and myself, where you have just the first child, and then for me, it was 11 years wait. And looking at it, you don't actually know. If you're listening to me and you're thinking, I'm not feeling anything, you might not even know until you've had a child. I didn't realize the effects of this secondary infertility on me. I didn't realize the way it killed my self-confidence, my psychosocial relationships, my planning for my life, until I took a decision at some point that I'll do something. I didn't realize that I was feeling anything. The distress, the psychological pain, the feeling of low self-worth, loss of security. What will the husband do if no child comes, no male child? Then there is loss of significance. So you have these three things worrying with the woman: low self-worth, low self-esteem, low feeling of significance, and insecurity in the marriage. And so a marriage matters a lot to a woman. And it comes with all the psychological fears of being abandoned in a situation in society. So this is what it is. And women have to be careful because men so define themselves with their virility, with their fertility, that women define themselves with attachment to a woman, to a child. And you know what? Part of the problem, I have a young man who got married and for 6 years, no children. And he kept telling his wife, when his wife said, it's time to have sex, let's have sex, he will say, the ones I've done before, where's the report card? Where's the report card? I have done one, where is the report card? And he kept on and on and on until she decided to go and have an affair and then got pregnant and came back and showed the husband, you see, I'm pregnant. It's you I should be asking about the report card now. So these things can drive women, some to even, some are thinking in Europe, some think of suicide. There are those who just feel I'm useless, I'm of no worth. And it's a feeling that we don't want to encourage anyone to have. And so like Yewande says, we have to please face women who are in this situation and talk to them and let them know that it's not the end of the world. The need for attachment can be achieved in other ways, through adoption, fostering, and in whatever way you can, like Mr. Olusanya says, be close to your spouse. That's just the most powerful thing about this. Use this opportunity to be close to your spouse. But then a woman doesn't control that, Mr. Olusanya. If a man refuses to be close to, like this man and his report card, what does the wife do? Thank you.
You're mute. You're mute. We can't hear you. I can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Eme.
Lost your sound.
We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, now we can.
I don't know what's happening.
You have
You probably have two devices on.
Okay,
So
is it better now? Is it okay now?
It's still echoing.
It's echoing. You need to switch off or mute it.
Mute the other one, please.
Yes, I have done.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Okay. So, sorry,
You
Mr.
you
Lusanya,
need
can
to
you hear me?
disconnect its audio or turn its volume down to 0.
Okay.
Whoa.
Oh dear. Is that okay now?
Okay. I think it's better now.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's just.
Or do we still, is it still the two? Can you hear me properly now?
We're hearing
It's
echoes.
echoing.
Yeah.
You need to switch one off if you can't do it.
Oh dear. Just bear with me 1 second, please. Okay. Oh dear.
You're still echoing.
Yes, you'd have to. I'm trying to switch that off. Is it? Oh dear, still there. Oh, I'm so sorry about this. But in the meantime, can I just ask, Shegun, please, can you just go on while I try and sort myself out?
Okay, what's the question?
I was just asking, what can a woman do when the husband, I was taking from what Mrs. Isweli said,
Right.
What can a woman do when her husband is being completely distant in such a situation?
Wow, that's a very difficult question, but I'll do my best with it. I think the woman just has to keep on trying, get the man on her side, because it takes two to tango. The two of them have to come together to have this child, and they have to try to at least talk about these things and really ensure that they're together, because there are times when one partner would decide, okay, they've had enough or things like that. There has to be complete togetherness. They have to be one in this. If not, it wouldn't happen. In our case, we waited for so many years, and my wife and I had to have one voice about this, because like it was said earlier, everybody thought I was fine and everything, which was true. But even when we were given the diagnosis, I kept it away from everybody. And I still heard things about, okay, why is your wife not happy? And talk. And I addressed this in my book as well. I thought, why do people always put it on the woman? And so the husband has to cocoon the wife, make sure that all the things that are coming from outside all that information don't keep filtering to her. Don't let people say all the wrong things to her. And she should, hopefully, if they're together, if they're really close, and they need to be close in this situation. It's a difficult situation. I mean, the man might be feeling funny, she might not be feeling too good, but even in that difficult situation, the couple have to come together, and they have to be one and one voice of this. And the man, most especially, must cocoon the wife. keep her away from all the negative information and negative, because they will come as much as possible. You should try to do that. And the woman, hopefully, if she's in that kind of environment, stay close to the husband. And they're one. We used to just go away. We wouldn't tell anybody where we're going. We just used to travel. We live in Europe. We travel to different parts of Europe for weekends and things. And people will call us and say, "You people have just disappeared again." I think, look, we just want to be away from all this stuff. And so I think that's one of the ways the woman has to either, negotiate this and make sure this happens, or the husband makes sure that they are one and they can keep away all the negative information and anything that wouldn't help them in this thing they're trying to do. Because like I said, to have a child, it takes two. And if emotionally they're not there, it's not going to happen. So I think that's my little point.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Sakios, was there, did you experience anything that you would like to share with us during your time of waiting? Were there challenges you went through?
Yes, of course, there are always challenges. The first one being people couldn't understand why I was so focused on this matter since I had a child. And I used to say, you know what, when you have that desire, it is a desire and it is a legitimate desire. So it is something that will still trouble you, still give you fear and anxiety, no matter the fact, that you do have one child. So I think that was one thing that I had to get over. I was very fortunate because I had a very supportive husband, and so I also had quite supportive in-laws and my own family and friends. So it wasn't any pressure I really had, was more a pressure I put on myself, to be honest with you. And then maybe my son. I remember once he said to me when my sister, who got married after me, was having her second child, and reminded me that how come Auntie Mobala can pray faster than you? Because I used to tell him that I was praying, how come he can pray faster than you? So really, as I said, most of the challenges were the ones that I placed on myself. And then just, it's just such a roller coaster of emotions. As I said, I was watching the movie The Wait, which is, inspired by my books. And every time I watch that movie, I cry because, what women who are waiting go through. And it's just an incredible feeling of, faith, hope, courage, God's word. And then when, as we say, the Red Sea parts, you go right down there and then you have to bring yourself back up. So it's a roller coaster of emotions. And I think that's one of the most difficult challenges. I was fortunate that I really did not have to deal with unkind family members, unkind friends, or kind frenemies, you will call them. But that is what a lot of people have to suffer. And we mustn't take it lightly at all. The pains that waiting have to go through.
Yeah, we cannot take it lightly at all. Like you said, a friend of mine, I recall several years ago, told me how her mother-in-law would come into the home and say, "Are there two men in this house? Tell me, are there two men in this house?" And I found that really, really terrible, to say the least. So how can society, what tips can you give, any of the speakers give, for society to help such women, because they're so unkind? I recall once I was in church when I was waiting for my child, and our pastor, Pastor Ito at the time, he said, hold hands with somebody and pray for the next person to you. And it wasn't anything to do with fertility or infertility. And the woman next to me grabbed my hands and she said, "Fruit of the womb, baby, shakalaba, shakalaba," and she went off. And I couldn't believe it. I just kept on looking at her. And obviously, that was the definition of who I was at the time and how unkind. So after the service, I was really low and told my husband, and he says, "Don't worry, she didn't mean any harm. It's just that she feels us all." And that wasn't my prayer request at the time, but she wouldn't even wait a minute to ask me what my request was, but went on to say, "Fruit of the womb, baby." So Mrs. Isweli, how can we help people out there to be more kind to women who are going through infertility?
Again, I think it's very difficult. Every woman or man who is in this situation has to be more positive, because this is what the society is like. They do this to single women who are not married. When are you marrying? When are you marrying? As if they'll go around the streets asking someone. So we have a very insensitive society when it comes to this. And so if any woman is listening and is a situation where you're waiting for children or you're waiting for husbands or anything else, it's important to realize that you are really on your own. It's sad to say this, but it's true. But it's fantastic if your family is on your side. And family is what helps. First of all, the family is very supportive. Again, I was lucky in my situation, supportive all around, even from my in-laws. Although, of course, when my mother-in-law cries about, oh, this is my first son and I don't have a son and I don't know when I'm going to go, I would join her to cry. And people will say to me, why are you crying? She's the one. I said, because I understand her situation. When you have a first son that you think, is just it, then you want grandchildren very quickly, grandsons, And so I'd cry with her and she'll see me. And she'll say to me, you stop crying. I want to say, Mama, you stop crying as well. So it's one of these things that the way of coping is not for us to take it as if the people are wrong. In our community, in the African community, children are a sign of fertility, sign of growth. So obviously, if they see a person who's not growing like that, they don't like, they hate barrenness. So it's each of us will just have to build our little community, make sure, see how you can be happy. I could actually have started getting angry with my mother-in-law, thinking, oh, she's demanding and wanting this, it's not my fault. But really, I understood. I understood that people are also asking her. People are also saying, no, child, haven't you gone to stay with your son for a child to look after his child? And so we have to understand that let us not defocus on others during this time. While our desire and our want is really, really giving us anxiety, frustration, and is a psychosocial issue for us, the important thing is to remember that I'm the pilot of this ship. Please remember that. I'm the pilot of this ship. No one's going to give me what I'm looking for. And so this is where counseling comes in. If you can't, do see a counselor. A counselor helps you through to analyze yourself, understand where you are, see what you're doing. And I remember in those days, a lady called me up and said, oh, I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and I want a 4th one. Please, can you pray for me? Someone had told me how anxious she was. So I actually was around the area. So I decided to go to her house to pray with her. And she had 2 other people and the lady who asked me to come. And as we finished praying, I led her in this prayer. And then somebody said to her, Mrs. Isoli has only 1 daughter, and you have 3. I didn't know this is what you wanted to pray about. I thought you wanted to pray about marriage. She said, she looked at me and said, you only have 1 child? And you just prayed with me, who's looking for a 4th child. So what I'm saying here is, it matters how we display or we present ourselves. We must self-present, no matter the frustration, no matter the anxiety, no matter the low self-esteem, whatever it is. Please see a counselor. I would see anyone in this situation free, just to help the lady get on with it. I am available, and you'll get my numbers, and we'll just talk about it. Just 30 minutes a week, and that's it. And you'll be able to find yourself and move on. That's the most important thing. Find yourself. Your self-worth is not based on giving birth to another human being. Your significance in society is not based on giving birth to another human being. If you believe in God, you came from heaven, you have dominion. Genesis 1:26-27 says, God gave dominion to the male and female he created. And so each of us have that dominion to achieve something. And it doesn't have to be linked to, I have a child or I don't have a child. Let's get us out of there. What has God given you? What can you do? What would you get to heaven and say to God, yes, you didn't give me a child, but see what I've done. See what I've done. they see what I've done. I think that's what I'd say to women in this situation.
Wow. Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you. Mrs. Zacchaeus, I know you have a lot to say about what women in waiting can be doing while they're waiting. Because, you know, this waiting can be 15 years, it can be 20 years, it can even be 30 years. So why put your life on hold while you're waiting for a child? So what can they do practically while they're waiting?
Yeah.
We can't hear you, Mrs. Zacchaeus. We can't hear you.
I'm so
Your
sorry.
mic is
I'm sorry.
muted. Okay, yeah.
Yes. Now, I was just saying that Mrs. Itueli has, been very clear about it. The thing is that we have to realize that the only purpose of our being here on earth is not to have children. I think once we can know that there is more to us than children, that we should not and cannot be defined by having children. Once you get into that place, that's the first place of freedom. But, I think it's also important to have a place where you can share with like-minded people. What I found with the books when I started writing them was that people were amazed because, and I started writing the books how many years ago? So many years ago now. At that time, people were not talking as freely as we talk now about what we call these sensitive issues. So people would read somebody else's testimony and say, this is exactly what I'm going through. So I'm not mad. So this is okay. So it's okay to feel like this. So I think the first thing is to find your safe group. It might be a counseling group. It might be a group of other women who are in that position. It might be a fellowship in church, whatever it is. I think it is critical that you find yourself a group of people you can share with, you can encourage each other. You will see one by one, somebody will get pregnant, it will encourage somebody's faith. Somebody may have a miscarriage, you're there to hold the person. And, I think that for me is critical for waiting women. I think it's also important, whoever you conceive your Lord, your God to be. If you're a Christian, you just have to hold on to the word of God. Whoever it is that you count as God, you have to hold on to something that is bigger than you, that will take you through the time. And then most importantly, and this is my mantra for everyone who's waiting, and I guess because for me, I was a professional, I became an entrepreneur, never, ever, ever not live your life. Because God created you to shine in so many ways. And there's so many other things that must be going on really well for you. It might be your career. Don't put your career on hold. Many women, they will not take the promotion. They will not take the out of town work that will allow them to get a promotion to a higher level. They won't go to the gym. And then because they're afraid if they go to the gym and get pregnant, the pregnancy will fall out, which is absolute rubbish. They won't do that. And then they put on a lot of weight, which now prevents them from getting pregnant. You must live your best life. You owe it to yourself and to your God to live your best life. Because the Bible says that when God is even searching around for whom to bless, is he going to hand a child to a miserable person, a person who has no hope, no joy? Do you understand? He will want to hand a child to a home where there is joy, there is, there is a home where there's love, a home where there's ready acceptance. So my mantra for waiting women, I know it is difficult. I've been there, but it is so important. Find yourself, stay in fellowship, hold on to whom you believe is a higher God for you, and most importantly, live your best life. Because I tell you, when those babies come, all those things you planned to do, you'll never be able to do them again. So you don't want to lose out both ways. So that's my word.
Absolutely correct, absolutely correct. I can't help but mention here my pastor's wife who passed on last year. She encouraged so many women. She went ahead to adopt 2 children and died without having a biological child, but enjoyed the joy of motherhood for the years she was here. I mean, she didn't know she was going to leave so early. So imagine if she had postponed all of that, but she enjoyed having 2 children before she left, So I want to encourage everyone to just live your life today. There's a famous title by Joyce Meyer. It says, enjoying today on your way to where you're going to. So enjoy your life now. I know it's very difficult, but what I used to do when I was waiting, I'd go to orphanages, pick up kids, take them out for the day, because I had that maternal desire. And that was my own way of fulfilling it. Take the kids out, you see them in my house, playing with them, and so life just went on. And like Mrs. Zacchaeus said, I put my head in my business. I just kept on driving things at that time, and my business grew tremendously during that time. So I didn't lose much really at the end of the day. So Dr. Bello, tell me please, can stress cause infertility? Dr. Bello, are you there, please?
Well, yes, in broad terms.
Okay.
Yes, and I've started to answer if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Yes, I said in broad terms, yes. But the specifics of infertility are more like biological things. It's more like biological things that actually cause it. Now, where stress causes it is that stress affects your reproductive hormones are first of all produced in your higher centers, in your brains and in glands near the brain. So stress, anxiety, any of those kind of emotional disorders can affect reproductive hormone production. But not to say sometimes it's like a slippery slope. You say stress affects infertility, and then women and men get more stressed trying to stop the stress that's affecting infertility. Just tell someone not to be anxious anymore. That's a bit tough, isn't it? When the thing that's making you anxious is still before you. But I think the short answer is yes. Stress can affect infertility, but it's not like it is something that's it's not always something you can pinpoint and address.
Oh, okay. In taking from that, so what are the causes of infertility? What are the major causes of infertility in women, first of all,
Okay.
please?
Okay, in women. Now, someone said earlier that there are appears that we investigate women more than men. And it's not really that we're saying that it depends more on women. It's just that women have so much more to contribute to reproduction than men. Sorry. I know that we both have
Sorry, bear with
units.
me
Men have...
one minute. Dr. Bello, sorry, just bear with me 1 minute because we hear sounds from Adebola. Emma, please, can you help us mute everybody else? Thanks. So that we can hear Dr. Bello well. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Bello, over to you.
All right. I said it appears that we evaluate women more because women have many stages to contribute to reproduction, many more than men do. Now, so that's why there are more causes of female infertility, but it does not mean that women contribute to infertility any more than the men do. It's pretty much even, really. About 40% is due to female factors, about 40% to male factors, and about 20% to a combination of both. But the female factors, think of it as every step of the reproduction, from egg production, which is a cause. For some reason, you're not producing eggs, maybe because your ovaries are damaged, or maybe because you have infrequent ovulation. Then the next step, the step of the tubes where the eggs and the sperm get to meet, a blockage in those tubes, either from damage from previous infection, an old long-standing appendicitis that wasn't treated on time, or infection that might be sexually transmitted infection, rarely maybe pelvic tuberculosis, anything, or a previous surgery that didn't heal so well and damaged those tubes. That's the second cause. A third cause would be causes that affect the uterus. It could be a form of endometriosis, which could affect both the uterus and other parts where it lands. Endometriosis is an entire topic on its own, so I'm actually wondering why I mentioned it. But it is a common cause of infertility. Or fibroids, which in themselves do not have to cause infertility, because many women have fibroids and live with them all their lives and it doesn't bother them. But for those women in which the fibroids blocks the tubes, or it makes the uterus so large that by the time the sperms have finished traveling before they get to the egg, they die, or it affects the uterus and doesn't allow the embryo to implant, in those situations, it can stop it. Or a vaginal disorder in which there's a blockage or it just didn't form well. So that's why there are many steps in which it can affect women. And the most common in our environments will be a tubal factor, a factor that has affected the tube. That's what we see most commonly in sub-Saharan Africa. And that's often because of previous infection. But not to say the others don't exist. And then the more we get modernized, our practice becomes modernized, and we get to evaluate other things, we find out those other things exist so much more than we thought they did. So that's it for female causes.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Bello. And can we touch on the cause of infertility with men briefly? Thanks.
Okay. In men, it's basically the issues with being able to deposit sperm in women. So it could be because sperm is not being produced, and might not be produced because of surgery you had maybe when you were in childhood and they didn't know that, maybe a groin surgery or a hernia or something, and they didn't know that they were damaging your testicles at the time, or total absence of it, or an infection again, or drugs you are on, or medication. I'm not necessarily talking about social drugs, medication for different things, antihypertensive drugs, drugs used for psychosis, all of them can affect sperm production. So if sperm is not being produced, or if sperm is unable to be ejaculated for some reason, it could be a psychological reason or a biological reason, or a problem with erection. So anything that will prevent you from depositing sperm in a woman, which is really the sum total of a man's contribution to reproduction, really, or to conception, I should say. So any of those things that will hinder that is what we call a male factor in infertility. And that's why we don't seem to evaluate them much. We just assess their sperm, and if sperm looks good, it appears that that's all that matters in the long run.
Okay, so Dr. Bello, I know at what stage, most women who cannot have children or have noticed within a year that they can't take in and have a child, they usually would sit back and not do much. What do you advise a woman who has noticed that in the past 1 year I've been trying for a child, or 2 years and cannot have a child? What should they do?
They should start by getting evaluated, identify what the matter is, and even if we find nothing is the matter, we'll still probably give fertility drugs to boost. I think that's primarily our problem, the long-term problem with infertility, the fact that we often do not seek help on time. And I don't blame anyone for that, because you keep hoping against hope that will happen by itself. So you see women come seek help for the first time after 20 years of marriage, when they're 42 and 45, when the natural decline of fertility has already started. I did a brief spot in a fertility clinic in the Middle East. I did a bit of training there maybe like 10 years ago. And what I found is that most of their patients were between 18 and 25. First, it was a government subsidized clinic, so it wasn't really a bother to pay for the IVF. But the thing is that they got married early, and there was a high premium on reproduction. So after a year or two of trying, they came to seek help. And once they find out that, okay, there's this problem, you need assisted reproductive techniques, they came and they got treatment. So really, they were really young patients, which is not what we see in our IVF clinic, for instance. So my advice is try early. If you're over 35, you don't even really need to wait a year. We recommend you wait no more than 6 months, especially if you've already identified a problem. Periods that don't come regularly, or you are aware, for instance, that you were told that a tube was removed for a disease, so a diseased tube was removed once and you have only one tube. There are reasons for you to get evaluated earlier, but 1 year is good.
Thank you very much for that. Mrs. Zakios, some of these solutions, medical solutions that Dr. Bello, Dr. Bello, you didn't mention, maybe I didn't ask, what are the solutions for infertility? I know this is a very broad question because there's so many different things that people, but mainly, can you touch on one or two solutions for infertility that are available today? I know medical science has advanced a great deal, and there are lots of solutions today.
Well, there are different steps to the solution. The basic steps would be to treat the most basic things. If you're not ovulating regularly, to give ovulation drugs. Those drugs are available over the counter around here, but they're misused that way. So to be given by a physician and to be monitored, like for instance, by ultrasound to see whether they're working. For males, there are drugs to use to boost sperm production. There's a simple surgery that can be done also to boost sperm production. If it's tubal damage, the basic treatment is to do surgery on those tubes. That surgery doesn't work really well because the damage is usually intrinsic. It has damaged the tube that reconnecting the tube is not always enough. So you find that more and more, most people just go straight to IVF, which is in vitro fertilization and the other assisted reproductive techniques. Because if you don't have too much time on your hands, as you're waiting to try the other things, time passes, female fertility declines, eggs become older and less likely to do reproduction. So many people skip to that, but there are basic things to do first, like I've said. Basic things for the male, it might be removal of fibroids, cutting out of endometriotic tissue by surgery, but all of it channel into getting assisted reproductive techniques, which will work for all the different kinds of infertility.
Thank you so much for that. Lots of experience there. Mrs. Zakios, some of these solutions that we know are available to help women who are suffering from infertility can be very expensive for people. So are there any organizations that offer financial assistance for women who cannot afford IVF and other fertility treatments?
Yeah, I believe there are. I don't have the names of them all off, but I know that even banks, actually, a lot of banks were into this promoting their women's desks, and because of that, I know that there were a few banks that were actually giving loans because, for infertility. I mean, those are one of the unfair things that used to happen in banks. And I remember when I used to work in a bank, it was something we fought for because, of course, if you're a woman in a bank and you're pregnant, everybody knows you're pregnant, and they'll now say they don't pay for fertility. Meanwhile, if you're a man, they'll be paying for your wife's treatments because they don't see her pregnant. So I know that banks do that. I am actually a chairman of a foundation. It's an American NGO, Anidem Gives, that has just come into Nigeria. And they actually partnered with us on the way to give grants. They give IVF grants to waiting couples. So I know that, they're now poised to do that. I believe Lady Biduni's foundation is also one of the foundations that does that. So I'm sure for people who are interested, and it is very, very expensive. And not only is it expensive, a lot of people have issues around going the medical route. I am a very practical Christian, and I believe that God puts everything on earth for our use and for our benefit. Somebody even actually once came to me and said that I have too many IVF testimonies in my books, that I'm not allowing women to stretch their faith. And I had to ask her that, have you ever waited for a child? Of course not. She had about 3 or 4 children. So, how can you say that we're not allowing people to stretch their faith because we're recommending that they take medical options? Because even the doctors who are atheists will tell you that, there is no, if I've always said, there is no medical transplanting the fertilization of the egg and the sperm is still something that there's no technical thing to do. I'm sure Dr. Bilo will tell us that is still something that is only God that can do. So it's really important that because they are extremely expensive interventions. So people need to just go out and find out which of these organizations can help them. But I can give the email address of Anidem Gives at the end, so people who are interested should go there. But I think it is important, and one of the things I did with my movie, because even though it is a faith-based movie, we made it clear that there are definitely many options for Christian women and men to employ in the search for this joy of children. Adoption being very important. Surrogacy, which the jury is still out on. Some people still feel surrogacy is a little bit out of it for them. But then, you think about it, Jesus was he was a surrogate baby now. Who carried God's son? Joseph and Mary. So, and yet it was God's son. So people just need to come to terms with these things in their journey of faith and decide what they can do, and also understand that God made all things available for them. So that's my view on that. Might be rather radical.
Okay, Mrs. Sweli, do you have any comments to make on something that Mrs. Zakios has touched on? I can see a smile on your face. You're muted.
You're muted.
Actually,
yes,
assisted reproduction technologies or whatever, I think they're called, Dr. Bello, I think they're called ART, assisted reproduction technologies. And there are many more are coming. But like Mr. Zakios says, they are very expensive. to take a loan and it fails. Currently, I hear that the success rate is about 25%. Dr. Bello, you might want to, and in Nigeria, it might be about 11. So we don't actually know. So I don't think that IVF is actually the answer. I would much rather say to couples, because IVF is, one, you have to have the money. Two, you've got to have many tries. So you take a loan, very few people have a first-time try. They're the lucky few that God has just chosen to bless. But for most cases, assisted reproduction is neither sure. The percentage of success is low. You now go and take a loan to get into that. Many people find that they've lost their house. I know a story I heard about in England. They sold their house, sold all their property, sold everything. 4 interventions later, no child. So it's something that we need to also advise women about. It's not as if it's the answer. Yes, so we've just got to be careful about promoting IVF as the answer. Number 2, IVF excludes a vast number of, because of the cost, of infertile couples. It's just out of their reach. So it's another thing, we must be sensitive to that many women and men will never, many couples will never even have the opportunity, loan or no loan, to go for IVF. And so what happens with IVF is it introduces and multiplies anxiety, depression, stress, and frustration, even during the treatment. And so it's a good thing to do if you have the money and you want to try. But I also think that it's not for us to push it. I know that those who, the clinics that do IVF will say to me, Ms. Iteli, shut up. But the truth of the matter is that what doesn't work for a vast majority is not an answer for the vast majority. And we still have to deal with that frustration that comes from IVF. The important thing, and I think adoption seems to me to be the best. Yes, Mrs. Zacchaeus, Jesus was an adopted child of Joseph. And so Joseph is an adopted father of Jesus. And it's important that we recognize that there's nothing wrong with adoption. We should push adoption. My only problem with pushing adoption is that increasingly, as adoption becomes more the answer, the governments that regulate adoption are themselves becoming more insensitive. And this is where advocacy needs to focus. That the worry, the things they give people to do, the things they ask for, the scamming that is now involved, that's these things that involve adoption at government levels is something we should cry out about, because it's not a good thing. Adoption, there are many children born out of wedlock, trust me, many, many, many children. And now people are telling, because of these problems that the governments are giving, people are going to buy eggs and buy sperm. I met a lady and she had an Indian looking child. And I didn't know who she was, and she came in. So I thought that she was
Married.
So as we got talking, I said, "Oh, is this your nephew?" She said, "Oh, no, it's my son." And I said, "Is your husband white or?" She said, "Oh, no, I bought the sperm." She bought the sperm. She and her husband had to buy sperm. And what I wasn't comfortable about was that her husband was the problem. And so she didn't mind getting that sperm as long as she was seen to be pregnant and to carry the baby. So as far as she's concerned, she's had a baby. But I wonder about the man. I'm not saying that, he may not be happy. I don't know him. But people are going to far lengths because adoption the government is making adoption increasingly impossible for those who can be very good parents. And so, it's something we need to look at, advocacy with government to ease all these rules and regulations that are stifling and the graft that is coming into adoption at the level of government. It's important to say that in trying to respect the rights of the child, the government is putting roadblocks every inch of the way, and that's not good enough. And so the children themselves who are now being born out of wedlock are still where they are. Their mothers, many die. I don't know if you saw the story about the girl who was told by her family, don't worry, we'll look after the child, would help you. And then what happened after 1 year? She drowned the child in a bucket. I'm sure some of you would have seen that. And increasingly, we have seen this killing of children after 1 year because nobody to take them on. So there are many children that are born in crisis pregnancy. Then there's another thing that's happening in the interest of this group. Many people are giving adoption a bad name, telling young women who should give up their babies happily that, oh no, a mother never gives up her baby. It's an abomination to give up your baby for adoption. So here I am talking to a young girl in crisis pregnancy, and she agrees to give up the baby. And then 3 weeks later, she's met someone who told her it's an abomination. So she keeps the baby. We've had 4 cases where they kept the baby, and within a year, the babies died. Wouldn't it have been best to hand over those children for adoption? So these are some of the problems that we're having. And over to you, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Isweli. Now, a question I want to ask you. Can everyone adopt? Because I know there are people I would not hand a child over to for whatever reason, Now, when we talk about, adoption is good. I'm an advocate for adoption, but is adoption for everybody, Mrs. Isweli?
It cannot be. At the same time, is parenthood for anybody? It's not for anybody. There are people who naturally have their own children and don't look after them properly. So a child is not a right. A child is not a right. It's one thing if you can get pregnant and then you get pregnant and you maltreat your child. But it's another thing if you are given a baby to adopt. There is a certain expectation that this child should be given the best. And so we must check that the parents we're giving these children to can look after them, can give them the quality of life every child needs under the Child Rights Act. This is very important for adoption. So yes, the governments of the various states are putting in place rules and regulations, and that's good. And creating a formal system that allows us to know who qualifies to adopt a child and who doesn't. So, and I know that certain states, once you adopt with them, they keep coming to check. They keep coming to check every month to see whether the baby is being looked after properly. So there is that support that the government does give. The government has very good rules under the Child Rights Act, but I think that it's being sort of, abused right now.
Thank you very much. Miss Dr. Bello, after how many, if someone tries IVF, I know someone who tried IVF, I think about 9 times, and eventually died. And, some people have suggested that was probably the reason why she, eventually died. Does it make any sense? How far should people go with this IVF thing? How many times is enough? Do you continue until you have a child? Or at what stage do you stop trying through IVF?
The truth is that there is no straight answer to that.
Straight answer.
In places where IVF is sponsored by the governments, they limit it to the number that you can do. Some countries will say 2. I'm not sure that any country, including the Middle East, where they were giving subsidized one, gave more than 4, as in 4 attempts that can be paid for by governments. But the regulatory bodies do not actually put an upper limit. The ESHRE, that's the European one, or the ASRAM, the American one, And even in the Nigerian Association, we've agreed on upper limit of age, but really not on number. So number usually ends up depending on how far you're willing to go. And then when each physician gives advice, it's usually based on their own bias. For instance, when I outline a treatment plan for infertility, I might tell you that I might start you on Clomid or a fertility drug, and then after this number of cycles, we're going on to injections. After this number of cycles, I think we should consider IVF. And then at the same time, I tell women about surrogacy, that if we find these other problems, we might have to do that. At the same time, I tell them about adoption. Many women outrightly tell you that adoption is not acceptable, but that's sometimes one of the stages of grief, that's and as we know. And after that denial, sometimes they find it easier to say. But the short answer is that there is no upper limit that medicine offers. It's just that, like when I'm talking to them at the beginning, I usually tell them that you may have to decide how far you're willing to stretch yourself emotionally, psychology, because it's not just finances, really. It's the heartbreak each time it goes wrong. It's the second guessing yourself and wondering why I'm spending all this money and it's not happening. And to divert briefly into what Mrs. Soili just said, I agree with her, really, that, and like we like to say in my clinic, when we get disappointed, remember my clinic is not a for-profit clinic. I work for a government IVF clinic. So it's not for profit. So we are not motivated by the profits.
And that's why we
tendency
you
to talk about adoption, saying that, look, this one, yeah, that this is a show we are
unbiased opinion.
That this IVF, you could try. Yeah, thank you. That you could try and not get it, but that you can consider adoption upfront, because really you will end up with the baby eventually. Now we say that with some caution, because we've had patients that have come back and shown us the lists that they were given from the ministry agency. Kickbacks at every level, every officer. And one calculated and showed me was more than $1 million. So she was to pay more than $1 million upfront in kickbacks, in grafts. Let me use the nice word. So she now said, this is not costing any less than the IVF that I thought I couldn't afford. And then we pointed out to her that, but yes, at the end of it, you will get a baby. Unlike this IVF that we're not sure that this 1 million naira will get you a baby. So I just diverted to contribute that to what Mrs. Soili said.
Wow. that's a tough one. But what state? Can I ask what state that was? Was it Oyo State?
Oyo State, yes.
Okay. Okay. I want to believe things are slightly different in Lagos State. Quite a number of people we know have gone through the process of adoption and just paid the 80,000 naira that's government requires that you pay. But having said so, I can't speak for for the government people. Now, Mr. Olusoya, we've been talking a lot about adoption as one of the solutions for women who are waiting for children. Of course, when you try IVF, try all of the other medical interventions that you can try, and they don't work, and you're thinking of adoption. Can one sufficiently love an adopted child just like a biological child? Because I know you have both. So you're muted, Mr. Olusoya.
Sorry about that. I'll go back a little bit because
or maybe, Mr. Olusoya, let me start first by asking, can a child adopted fill that vacuum in a person's life who's waiting for a child? And can the person love the child just like a biological child?
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Like I was saying, I'll still go back a little bit because in our case, we went through probably the whole plethora of processes or ways. My wife is a lot younger than I am. I might look a bit old. Anyway, she's a lot younger than I am. So we when we got married, we thought, yeah, everything was going to be fine. And so when we waited for a few years and we went to do the normal checks, like the doctor said, we're told my wife had polycystic ovaries. So I said, okay, now we know what the issue is. We can deal with it. And so we did the NHS thing. It didn't work. Then we went to Harley Street. And for those who know Harley Street, probably the most expensive place you can go for IVF. And we did many cycles, and they kept the eggs and everything. And it's a long story. Anyway, we stopped after a while because they were coming up with different methods. It was IVF, IUI, and all sorts of acronyms were coming in, and all sorts of methods. And then my wife was reacting badly to a lot of the medication. And then, of course, there were times when the pregnancy went to 22 weeks and everything. So we then decided to stop. But in between, I had thought, okay, if this is not working, should we look at surrogacy? My wife would not have any of that. And so we looked at all the different routes. And then she suggested adoption. When she suggested adoption, like you said, my first reaction was, as a guy, and probably a bit selfish as well, because I was thinking, okay, medically I'm cool, so why should we should go surrogacy, because then I can just give my sperm and we have a child. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. And I said, okay, what are we going to do? So we waited, and then she suggested adoption. The issue for me at the time was, this is not my child. And so we went through that. But as a Christian, I stepped back and I said, Lord, if this is something you want me to do, then show me. And I remember I read Mrs. Akios's book as well, 1 and 2. I read them. Somebody gave them to us because we used to get a lot of stuff from people. Ask you to come and pray and do stuff and send you books. And I remember we read another book by some lady in the States as well. Very interesting. Anyway, so we went through the whole thing, and then she suggested adoption. And so I started praying about it. Interestingly enough, not long after she talked about it, went over to the US for a wedding. And a senior member of a family that I wasn't really close to him called me and said, he's a medical doctor. And he says, what's happening? You guys have been waiting for quite a while. And I said, yeah, this is what the diagnosis is. And he said, look, why? I know you want to do medical stuff, but why don't you think about adoption? And when he said that, I just realized that God was just telling me, because he didn't know anything about the conversation I had with my wife before we went to the wedding in the US. So we came back to the UK, and I started looking into it without telling my wife, because I thought, being the man, okay, I'd said I'm not doing it. I didn't want to say anything. So I started looking into it. It got to a stage when they said, okay, you've got to come with your wife and we've got to discuss this. So I told her, she was very happy, and we started looking into it. Going forward, many years after that, when we finally adopted and our son came to the house, and I wrote something, I think it's in my book, and I wrote in other places I've written as well, about the miracle of adoption. And what I described as the miracle of adoption is when you have your adopted child in your house and it just feels right. And then later on, when we had our birth children, we had a daughter and a son. And I see them sit down in my house, just look at the three of them. And I don't feel that there's any difference between the three kids. That is a miracle in itself. And that's the joy of adoption for me. Because really, people might say all sorts of things. But now, I mean, we adopted our son about 16 years now. It's 17, it's going to be 18 in October. And it's amazing. I sit down with my son, went out for a meal the other day because just finished his 12 over. And we were just at the restaurant, just chatting, just him and I, and the conversation was just amazing. I stepped back a second after a while. I thought, this is just an amazing thing. We're here in the UK together, just him and I, and we're always in the kitchen cooking, doing all sorts of things, and it just
you have a big boy too. You're enjoying a big child.
Yes, he takes care of me now. He cooks for me and does all sorts. And I look back over the years. I wish we
Even
had.
did that so sometimes some might find not
Prof,
be weak.
Prof, there's somebody you have to thank you.
And I look back over, the only thing I say to myself that is that I wish we had done this a lot earlier. Because
That's what everybody says to adults.
I'm going to be 60 early next year. And I'm thinking, wow, I have a teenager. In fact, my daughter is going to be is a teenager as well now. We could have had older children and all that kind of stuff, but I thank God that we did it at the time we did it. And going back to your question, does it feel a vacuum? Mega, 100 times. It feels that vacuum many times. And the other thing is, I always thank God because I say, Lord, I thank you for helping us to fill a vacuum in a child's life as well. This person keeps going because I'm sure he was there thinking, okay, I would want a family. And when we came into his life, it must have been amazing for him. And we met his birth mom, and she was overjoyed that we had gone through this process. So now I'm thankful. My other kids are a lot younger than him, and so they're coming up. But him and I, we can, as two men, we can relate in so many levels, and there's so much we do. And so I'm biased when you talk about adoption because I think it's the best thing. I have so many friends who have adopted, and we just enjoy this whole miracle that God has given.
Thank you so very much for that. Thank you very much for that. I'll just ask Mrs. Isweli briefly, because we have to give a few minutes for people to ask questions. At what stage and age does one accept the painful reality that they might not be able to have biological children and move on to consider adoption? At what stage would you suggest?
I think Dr. Bello spoke about that, and I would go with her timing. First year, nothing, like she said, you're having regular sex, nothing is coming on, you go to the doctor immediately, because it's important in our culture. This is another thing. In England, it wouldn't matter. When I was worried about, oh, I've just had my child and I haven't been pregnant again in spite of sex all the time, the doctor said to me, ha, 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 ha. It doesn't matter, keep trying. And so but in Nigeria, we know that it does matter. And so I would say as early as possible, without being over anxious. There's nothing lost. You can adopt a child and still have yours later on. And I know couples who've done that. So go on, have your baby adopted if it's easy to do. Meanwhile, it keeps you busy saying you're doing something. Go through the process of the government checks, go through the process of going around the homes to see the kind of, to see if there's a baby out for you. You might even choose to adopt an older child, like a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old, while you wait for yours. And actually, I think that a child in the home tends to absorb the stress and the frustration that a mother or a father might have. And so there's some good in saying adopt as soon as you can, and then there's the age, what's it now, the biological clock of women. I think Dr. Bello was referring to that at a point where from age, I know a particular age, I think the doctor said 35, Dr. Bello. And for men, I now read, as I was preparing for this session and I was researching, and I came across an Oxford report that says male infertility is quadrupling. And not just that, it's becoming, how do I want to say, it's becoming something that, an epidemic as it were. And this is because of so many things. Therefore, male infertility by 40 is going down. By age 40, male fertility, is going down. If male fertility is going down by 40 and women's fertility is going on by 35, I think the couple should look at this age band and do something. I also say that the adopted child, it's good for the child to have young parents if they have money at that point. I like what Mr. Lusanya said about him and his son. his first child. They talk like men. It's an amazing thing. So I wouldn't say that there's a particular age. If you want to keep waiting until you are absolutely sure, that's fine too. I think people should do what they're comfortable with. This is not something that any of us can prescribe. We cannot be prescriptive because different people, different strokes. And but if you feel that you can't wait any longer, please go ahead. And if you feel you can wait, please go ahead and wait.
Thank you so much for that. We're just rounding up now, and we'll take a few questions. But before I ask people out there who have questions to ask, Mrs. Zacchaeus, when one decides to take the option of adoption, does that mean that they've given up on God or God has failed them? A lot of Christians have challenges with accepting adoption because it's almost as if, I'm not trusting God anymore, or God has failed me by going on to adopt a child. I didn't have mine biologically and all of that. Can you throw some light on that, please? You're muted, Mrs. Zacchaeus.
Sorry.
That's
A lot
okay.
of people, I was just saying that you've honestly answered the question, because a lot of people do have that mindset that adoption is like a lesser option, that it is not as good as having your own birth child. And it's something that I think, though, in the past few years, where there's been a lot more exposure, there's been a lot more talk by the people of faith to let people know that we are all God's adopted children anyway. So we should understand that adoption is clearly an option for Christian couples. And it was one of the very important things about the books for me. And I thank all the many people who, women who shared their adoption stories, because we need to understand that God can choose to make you a mother or a father through many ways. And some people who will just say, no, it's not the birth route, it's going to be the adoption route. And very many people, when they obey and go the adoption route, as with the Olusoyas and several other people I know, the children come. Because, when your anxiety, I mean, you asked Dr. Bello something, does stress, cause infertility? Yeah, I mean, even the Bible says anxiety in the heart of man causes depression. So when that anxiety goes because you have a child, an adopted child, it just makes it so easy. It won't happen for everybody, but it happens for a lot of people. So I want to encourage people. And, Mrs. Swelly, I absolutely agree with you. Adoption seems, because of the expense, and not only the expense, as other people have said, the great pain that is involved in the IVF and the very, poor chances of success. Adoption is something people should consider. But hey, here we are in Nigeria. It's now becoming roadblocks everywhere. Money has to be paid. In another year or so, people who don't have money will not be able to get to adopt children. So, I think advocacy, as Mrs. Swelly has mentioned, advocacy with the government in terms of ensuring that this thing is made as easy as possible. With still going through all the checks and balances that they must go to make sure the right people adopt, but without the stress, so that it can be, even though, it's still a culture shock for a lot of people, but with our generation, and as our people are getting more exposed and younger people are doing it and people of faith are doing it, then it makes it easier for people to accept.
Thank you so very much to all our speakers. I'll just let you have like 30 seconds to give your closing remarks, and we'll ask a few questions from the audience. The time is fast spent. Mrs. or Mr. Lusonya, please, your closing remarks. Thank you. Just 30 seconds, please, very briefly. Thank you.
Right.
You're muted.
I'll just say to any ladies out there or couples, especially who are waiting, waiting is not the end of the story. There's a way through, there's a method, there are all sorts of things you can do. First thing is to just stick together as one. And if you're a Christian, seek God completely and let him show you which way he wants you to go. We thought of so many ways, but in prayers, we found out that it was adoption. And then God blessed us with 2 birth children. So he can do it in so many ways. So don't give up. It's not the end of the road. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Isweli, please.
I'd say the same thing. Please don't give up and don't get lost in the frustration, the lack of confidence that this can generate. It is natural to have that, but please seek help. Seek help. You can call Emma Kenzwa and she will direct you to where to go for counseling. But I can say to you that God is on the throne and will give you what you want.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bello, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Is your closing?
I think, yeah, thanks. My closing remark is that irrespective of all the advances in medical knowledge and the things that you can offer, there is not always a solution. I'll be the first to admit that not everyone will get a medical solution, and not everyone, unfortunately, will end up being a biological parent. But like all the other speakers have pointed out, there is more to it than being a biological parent and other options that can still make you a fulfilled and happy parent. Thank you.
Mrs. Zakios, thank you very much, Dr. Bello. Mrs. Zakios.
Yes, I think for me, prayerfully consider all the options. I mean, there are just so many options, from even the very basic ones that Dr. Bello said that are not high-level interventions. Consider all the options available to you. Prayerfully decide which one you'll go to. But for me, the most important thing is during this season of waiting, live your best life so you will have no regrets.
Wow, fantastic. And I like what you said there, Mrs. Zakios, prayer. Prayer is so important. I find during the time I was waiting for a child, prayer had a lot to do with it. Like Dr. Bello said, there are many things that medical science cannot sort out. Some things are spiritual, and you need to go before God in a place of prayer and break covenants, break strongholds standing in the way. Having said so, are there any questions? Does anyone have questions to ask? We can just take maybe 3 or 4 questions quickly if you have any questions. I believe we've covered most of what people would have wanted to ask, but if you have any questions, please go ahead. Yes, I see a hand up. Agu Ijoma. Can you unmute Agu Ijoma, please? And can I kindly ask that we keep our questions very brief and straight to the point so that we can close this meeting as soon as possible?
Yes. There are questions in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
I send them to your WhatsApp.
Okay, let me just take Agu Ijoma while I go into the chat box. Thank you. If I can find it. Prof, can you help me unmute Agu Ijoma? If you can find her. Hello, Prof.
I'll do that now. I'll find her.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm doing that.
I'm using my iPad, so I'm finding it a bit difficult. My laptop just... Okay, there we go. Okay, you can't...
Yes, I've unmuted her. I've unmuted her.
I see. Okay. Do you want to go on Agu Ijoma?
Yes, good evening.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you quickly ask your question, please?
Yes, my question is not a long question. I want to adopt, but it has not been easy. So I need an assistant. So I don't know how the contact or how I could get it. Because I have so many questions, but I see that there's no time. So the summary of it
I would leave if you just... Okay.
The summary of it is that we need an assistance on how to adopt.
Okay. If you can just take down my number,
080.
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, I'll just leave my telephone number on the what do you call it? 0803-0666-025. And you can send a message to that number, please, and we would guide you as much as we can. It's not in our power to give a child out to anybody. It's in the hands of the government. But like you heard the speakers mention, and it can be a bit of a, what do you call it? It takes a while sometimes, But I often say to people, don't give up. You know, you're pregnant for 9 months. I know for most people who've waited for 5, 10 years and all, you don't want to wait a day longer, you know, but that's the reality. But you start, it will finish at some stage, no matter how long. So I always recommend that you start, but we'll let you know how to do that. Any other questions? No? Okay, I can see many hands up. Prof, please, can you help me mute anybody whose hand is up so that they can ask their questions quickly? We would have to round up in another 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I've unmuted some people.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Bumi. I just want to quickly ask 2 questions in one. I'll make it very brief. The first one is, I realize that most of the things we've been saying all day is actually going to be easy for people that are quite educated and they are probably have access to all this information. How do we help people who are not so educated, maybe like illiterates, who would like to, and they're also trusting God for the fruit of the wombs, and they don't have access to all this information? How can we bring it to the grassroots, to the level that those people can have access to this kind of information? That's number 1 question. And number 2 question is about someone I know that she's so scared to adopt because she saw a friend of hers who adopted a baby, and the baby happened to be seriously, severely autistic, so she's worried. So what kind of advice would you give to somebody like that?
Okay, about bringing it to grassroots, Mrs. Isweli, would you take that for us, please?
Usually, if you adopt through the government agency, they check very well. And if the baby is severely ill, you can return the baby. I know that with the government agencies. I know a few cases of such returns. Unless, of course, there are children that are given up for adoption, but they're mainly abroad. Most children with difficulties are given to foreign parents so that they can get good medicals outside of Nigeria. But what I have heard from those who have got babies that have illnesses they couldn't cope with, they say as soon as you discover, you go. But either you return the child. Although that's not a very nice thing. And one of the ladies I knew returned the child and later went back for the child. And that has become the reason she set up a cerebral palsy center. So that can happen, but it's important to have a discussion with the agency that you're getting the baby from, telling them what you want, just as they are telling you what they want. The agreement is that they give you a baby that's not sick.
Okay, I have an opinion that I often say to people, when a child is in your womb, can you choose what kind of child is coming out? I think, like Mrs. Isweli has said, it's pretty unfair to return a child. That's like abandoning the child a second time. You know, prayerfully consider, pray when you want to go and adopt a child, and believe that what God gives you is yours and he will give you the grace to cope. So who would take that child when the child is returned? I know it's a difficult thing to cope with a child who, and obviously if you cannot do it, you can't do it. But when a child comes through our wombs, we don't choose. They come out, whatever problems they come with, we have to live with the problem and solve the problem. You know, and I think really we should have the same attitude towards adoption. But having said so, you know what you can cope with. And I think perhaps that's one of the advantages of adoption, that you can choose. Okay, Mrs. Zakios, please, what can you say about bringing this information to the grassroots? It's difficult, you know. The lady asked.
I'm sorry, it's not a question I can answer because it's not an area I have experience in, to be honest. So I think that's something that maybe the government or people who would set up NGOs specifically for that purpose. So I'm sorry, I don't think I'm the right person to give an answer for that. I don't really have an answer.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I can say something here. I think we have to understand that the child that's going to be adopted is the focus. It's not the parents that's the focus, it's the child. And that child must be given to people who can look after the child.
Sure, I agree.
If you are in the grassroots and you can't even look after a baby, then another person's baby shouldn't be given to you. And I know that sounds unfair, but really and truly, the adopted child is not for just anybody. The whole reason for having a child adopted is for the good of the child, the express good of the child, not for the good of the parents. The good of the parents come later, but the child is the first consideration for adoption, to give the child the kind of home he would otherwise not have had with a single mother or with a mother who didn't want the child. I think that's the whole point, you know. And
Thank you.
we shouldn't look at this as low high. The low people in society, the grassroots people in society, have ways they sort this out. To be honest, they have ways they sort it out, and I don't know, but they do have ways they sort it out.
Okay, thank you for that. This is really this Grace Adekunle. Grace, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's actually a slight contribution. My name is Grace. Thank you, everyone, for this forum. It's actually an eye-opener, and it's a great relief. I read your book, God's Waiting Room, until one day. One day. I just want to testify to the fact that, because I have experience in both, an adopted child is your child. I have one right now, is about 2 years plus. The joy and light and transformation that this child has brought to my family, I cannot speak about it here. The bond in the family, the bond between all of us, in fact, is amazing. So I just want to say that, we believe in our pastors and, men of God so much. We should just take this thing to the church, because people are just praying and praying and praying and praying.
Endlessly.
And you don't know that God has reserved something for you somewhere. I think it's high time we do that. It's not enough to just, be talking about it. Let them be talking about it, at the altar of God, so that they know that every woman is a mother. So I just wanted to, highlight that, because somebody asks, the difference, if there's going to be a difference. There is no difference. To be honest, it is just magical. There's no difference. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that. So on that note, I think we can one more hand. IB. Okay, let's take IB. Okay.
Hello, yes, good evening, everybody. Yes, can somebody hear me? Can somebody hear me, please?
We can hear you, yes.
Can somebody hear me, please? All right. So thanks very much, Eme, for this program. I just want to contribute to the person who asked about taking it to the grassroots. So I was opportune to go for an interview for adoption after the long process, like everybody has rightly said. And when I went there, I went very early, so I was one of the first people. But by the time it was almost time for the panelists to come in, I was shocked. The room, the hall where we were, somewhere in Yaba, was full to overflowing. The rich, the poor, the old, the young. And so it made me realize that a lot of people are now more enlightened about adoption. So I think that it has already gone to the grassroots, and a lot of people are accepting it and, making the best of it in our times. That's what I think. That is going into the grassroots more than we can even think. It was full. I was shocked, but I was appreciative to God that people are getting more enlightened and people are embracing it and having happier and more fulfilling homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for that. And at this point, we'll just draw this meeting to a close. I just want to remind us that the period of waiting does not have to be a sad time in your life. It doesn't have to be a time when you wear a long face and woe is me kind of attitude. You can actually have joy while you're waiting. And you heard from our speakers about the things you can do while you're waiting. Get busy with your business. Take care of other people's children around you, your nieces, your nephews, kids in the orphanage. Volunteer your time at an orphanage and just go and carry some children. Sometimes when people call me up and say, what can we give to your orphanage? And I say, one of the greatest needs I have it's just mothers who can go and sit there and carry those babies for me and just love on the babies. Because yes, people provide things for them, but we have one nanny to 4 children.
Yeah.
So what time does that nanny have to really cuddle that child properly? There's no time. She gives a bath, drops this one, picks the other one up and does this and does that. So just going in to sit down, carry a child and kiss the child and let the child fall asleep on your bosom. That's wonderful. That's magical for me and very much needed. So I'd say to every woman who's out there and still believing God for a child that all hope is not lost. And keep an open mind. For some people, you will have your biological child. But like Dr. Bello said, there's some things that medical science cannot solve. And you must get to a point where you're realistic and say to yourself, listen, I would adopt a child, or I can adopt a child. And perhaps at some stage, you will still have a biological child like the Olusonyas. And if that doesn't happen, like in the case of my pastor's wife, it's fine. You can live a truly fulfilling life at the end of the day. So the Bible does say there will be no barren in the land, and God is true to his word. We live in a broken world, so sometimes things do not work as they ought to. But you can stand on the word of God and let God choose for you which way the child comes. I often look at Moses, who was adopted in the Bible. And if Moses was not taken from one environment to the environment where he grew up, Pharaoh's house, would he have had the audacity to come back and stand before Pharaoh and demand that God's people should go? I think that he was able to do that because he had lived in the palace, so it wasn't any big deal. So it was in God's plan. So sometimes God plans things in a different way from what we hope or what we had imagined for our lives. I cannot help but tell this story I was told about 2 weeks ago about a lady who'd been waiting for a child for several years and praying. Eventually, in her 16th year of marriage, she had the baby, but she died immediately, leaving the child. Yes, and 3 months after, her mother died because she couldn't bear the loss. That was her only child. So sometimes when God doesn't answer us, it's for a good reason. And all of those 16 years when God was not answering her, he just wanted to save her life. But she just felt she needed to go that way. And in the process, had the baby, but never lived one day to take care of that baby. So I would say, like Mrs. Zakios said, please prayerfully take the steps you want to take. Ask God what he wants to do for you. And adoption is no less a method of having a child. Like I often say, and most people who listen to my seminars, Jesus was adopted. And look at how he turned out. What if Joseph had decided not to cover Mary's shame, and drive her out of the house? Our Lord and Savior Jesus would not have been born in that nice, warm environment of family. So please keep an open mind and God will answer you, but in his own way. God bless you. And thank you for, remaining in this meeting for almost 2 hours. Our next meeting is on the 18th. We hold this every 2 weeks, the first Sunday of the month and the third Sunday of the month. And it's always at 6 p.m. Our next meeting will be everything you need to know before adoption. So we'll be talking about all of the different things you need to know before adopting. We'll have somebody from the Ministry of Youth and Social Development, Alausa, who would tell us what we need to know from that end. We'd have a lawyer tell us the legal implications and a medical doctor also address the medical issues with adoption. And yes, I think that's it. So we do look forward to having you back on the 18th. Do tell other people about this. I know there are many people who are out there suffering in silence, but a problem shared is made easier to bear at the end of the day. So we are platforms. You would get information on the Joy of Adoption Instagram platform, and this recording will be available on our YouTube channel in about 24 hours or less. Thank you very much. God bless you. And to every woman who's still believing God for a child, my heart goes out to you. Keep praying. Don't give up on God. God will make the way for you. where there's no way. God bless you. And to our speakers, I cannot thank you enough, Mrs. Isweli. Thank you very much for coming on. She's got a wealth of experience, somebody I always call on all the time. Mrs. Zakios, I know how difficult this was for you to get on this because you had an engagement earlier. So I appreciate you coming on board with your experience, and you've offered so much hope to so many people with your book, The Waiting Room 1, 2, 3, 4. I remember when she said after the second one, no more, I'm not doing it anymore. And God has held her and pushed her. And we might have the 10th one at some stage. I know she will say no way. But thank you so much. She's even taken it a step further with her film. And I want to encourage everyone to go out there and watch that amazing film, The Wait, and be encouraged. Tell your friends about it. Tell everybody who's out there. And it's a wonderful film to watch. And Mr. Lusonya, I'm always indebted to you for coming on this platform because most men will not speak about this very sensitive issue, but he's always available, very open, and you've been a blessing to so many men and of course women too. And Dr. Bello, thank you very much for taking out time to be here. Your wealth of experience, unbiased contribution is very much appreciated. We needed somebody like you who would just tell it to us as it is. God bless you all very much, and thank you.
Thank you. God bless you. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. And Professor Emewaje, thank you so much for stepping in. God bless you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Good evening. Bye.